Hi, welcome to my channel. So as promised, here is another costume breakdown. My cosplay update will be up next week, but for now we're going to focus on the costumes from the movie Wicked, which, well, I guess I should say Wicked Part 1, which I absolutely loved. I'm a huge fan of the musical and I'm a huge fan of the movie, and I was literally jaw drop in awe when I saw the amazing costumes in this movie, the attention to detail and all the tiny little fiddly things they decided to do to bring this movie to life on the big screen, and I could not get enough of it. I think I saw it twice in theaters, and then I got the privilege to go see the Wicked experience at Universal Studios, which had several of the costumes on display, and I got to take a ton of photos and videos and get really up close and personal with these costumes and get a ton of detail. And that is what I want to share with you today. I can't break down the costumes in the movie because there are over 1,000 costumes across the entire movie. I should say 1,000 unique costumes. There are duplicates of many of these, and that would take me forever to get through and probably like a year's worth of video series to do it. So I thought that we would focus specifically on my favorite character, Glinda, and 4 of her outfits that I got to see in person. I want to talk through, seeing them, the details, and how I think they were constructed. Very excited to share my firsthand experience with this. So with that, if you like this video, make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to drop your comments down below and subscribe if you want more content from me. But with that, let's go ahead and hop on into it. I'm going to go in order of what I think is least complicated to most complicated with Glinda's outfits. So the ones that I actually got to see in person are her pajamas, her school uniform, her Ozdust dress, and the bubble dress was on display. So I think we're going to go ahead and start with the pajamas, and I will put up photos and videos that I took from the Wicked experience. I want to point out that the lighting was very dim inside the exhibit. I don't quite know why. Maybe it's to make everything glow and sparkle a bit more. So the lighting is going to be a little weird. I will try to correct it as much as I can in editing, but the coloring may be a bit off. I also want to point out that there is a massive color grade across this movie that sort of washed out a lot of the colors. So the colors in person were actually far more vibrant than they were on the movie screen, so just keep that in mind. So starting with her pajama set, which is on my to make list because I think it's super adorable, we actually have 2 pieces here. We have the romper and then the robe. The romper I don't find too terribly interesting. It is a simple romper, but the embroidery work on it is quite nice. They bring about this butterfly motif. The theming with Glinda was butterflies. According to the designer Paul Tazewell, this butterfly symbol was used in Glinda, specifically in the movie, because he wanted her to represent all things airborne. Specifically, there's a quote here that says, "My Glinda represents all things that are airborne, and the choice of a butterfly showcased that." I don't think that's like a super great explanation as to why the butterfly was chosen, because there's a lot of airborne things. I actually think that in addition to that, butterflies are fluttery. They flit about from place to place to place. They're easily startled. They're somewhat hyper. They almost never rest, and that is very much Glinda's personality. She's very much a social butterfly. She flits around quite frequently, and she never seems to calm down or rest. So I think that the butterfly is an excellent symbol, and when you look closely at the romper, you do see this embroidery and these little butterfly details on the romper. Additionally, we have her robe, which is far more interesting and elaborate compared to the romper. We have these exaggerated sleeves. Apparently this has over 6 meters of net strips. I think is referring specifically to the ruffle spirals, because when you get up close, they are made of the same type of net fabric. Actually, it's quite interesting. When you see this up close, on screen, it's kind of hard to tell what it's made out of, but it's definitely made out of a net. And when you get up close, there's these little dots. So it looks to me to be closer to a Swiss dot fabric. So I actually have already purchased a very close fabric to this. I am going to have to dye it because I couldn't find it in the right color pink, but it appears to be like a netted Swiss dot fabric. Additionally, we have these spirals, which are made out of the same fabric, it looked like. And we're just leaning into the bubble spiral thing. Everything about Glinda is spirals. We know they use the Fibonacci spiral quite often in her outfits, particularly in her bubble dress. And here I think we see it represented again in the spirals used throughout the costume. And these spirals do spiral up from the bottom and up through the top of the robe. And of course we have her elongated sleeves, which appear to be made of 2 different spirals sewn together. It is meant to symbolize the glamour of Hollywood, and I definitely see, particularly with the hairstyling, a nod to the golden age of Hollywood from the 40s and 50s. So that is her robe. Let's go ahead and move on to her Oz Dust party dress. So this dress is one of my favorites. The coloring is so beautiful with the yellow to pink ombre. It's so bright in person, and the designer actually said that this was inspired by a real rose that has the same coloring. And when you look at it from that perspective, you can clearly see it is petals wrapping around in different directions around Glinda's body, and it definitely looks like she's just enveloped in rose petals. So this is multiple layers of what looks to be a silk chiffon embroidered with beads, I think some sequins if I remember correctly, wrinkled and floofy and have sort of a life and movement of their own. I will say that I did see someone make this not too long ago, and I can't remember the creator. If I find her, I will make sure to link her below. She created it, the texture of this, which is supposed to mimic the texture of the rose petal, by, I think she wetted the fabric and then ironed it into these crinkles because the shapes are so organic. But it does lace up in the back and has matching shoes, which I'm obsessed with. Those shoes are absolutely stunning with their coloring. It's just one of the most unique dresses I've seen. It clearly has some sort of structure built within it, some sort of corsetry that is laced up and pulled in the back to give it some structure in the bodice, but the rest of it flows wonderfully. And actually what was really neat about this dress, seeing it in person, is I can see that all of the edges were raw. They were all completely raw edges, and I could not detect an ounce of fray checks. I'm not 100% certain how they managed to keep this fabric from completely falling apart. My assumption is maybe they burned the edges very carefully because I couldn't find evidence of scorch marks. So the dress itself is actually very fragile, and I could see it starting to fall apart at the edges. There is fraying at the edges, there's pulling apart of the fabric. I think a lot of that is from wearing it and dancing in it. So seeing those wear marks is really neat because you know that this was a costume that was used in the movie or at some point in time during filming, and not just something that they pulled off the costume rack and circled around the country for people to see. There was clear wear and tear on this dress, but given their use of silk organza throughout the rest of Glinda's costumes, my guess is that this is also silk organza. And I have that knowledge because I ran into two professional costume designers, and we had an hour-long discussion around these costumes, and they helped me pick out the type of fabric that was used, and they were like hands down silk organza. So I'm going to lean on their expertise and say that that's probably what was used. So that's Glinda's Oz Dust dress. I don't have too much else to say about it because I honestly did not spend the majority of my time focusing on this dress, but I did get some lovely footage and photos. The next two are literally what I went back to see multiple times, and one of them is her uniform. I'm obsessed with her uniform. I actually want to create her skirt and wear it into the office. I think that skirt is wearable in real life and super versatile. I was surprised on this outfit. So let's start with what it's made out of. We have the skirt, which actually appears to be 2 types of skirts sewn together. She has a blouse underneath it, and she has a jacket. Now I will say there are multiple variances of this costume throughout her wear, particularly during the Loathing song. She mixes and matches different pieces with like the skirt and the jacket. So I'm going to focus on this version that I saw at Universal. So we have the skirt, which is consisted of a pleated underskirt and then this flat overskirt that is made of multiple unique panels that are a very odd shade of purple. I had a hard time picking out what this color was. It's kind of gray in person, it looks kind of purple in person. On screen, it's clearly a lavender color, but in person, it's not clearly a lavender color. And I do think the lighting of the experience had a huge part to play in my difficulty in figuring out what on earth this fabric is. I really know what this is made out of. I was originally assuming wool, and then when I saw it in person, I couldn't quite figure out. It didn't look like wool. It looked like some sort of suiting, or I don't know, it's not a twill. It's the wrong weave for a twill. I don't know what this is. So I am still on the hunt for this type of fabric. If anyone knows what this is, let me know. I didn't actually know this until seeing it in person, but on top of all of this, you have the striping. And the striping is actually embroidered. And I recently saw a video where it showed them embroidering these pieces, but that was not out when I originally went. So I actually saw the Wicked experience back in like November, so it's been a while. But that is how I found out that it's embroidered. It has dark pink and light pink embroidery next to each other. So all of these pieces are embroidered and sewn together to give it that zigzag sort of look. And then there is the baby pink, light pink button-up shirt that she wears. You get a better view of this in the movie than you do in the experience because they had the jacket on it. However, I got a nice up-close look at the detail in the neck. And this is actually a part where my husband and I spent a lot of time going back and forth on that construction, and then the costume designers I ran into also help me out here. So it is actually pin tucked pleating on the top, and then they cut out half circles along those pin tucks. This was another piece of fabric that the designers helped me determine was silk chiffon, and we were all baffled as to how they cut those holes out without the fabric falling apart. There's no evidence of like a fray check or burning the edges, but those holes are there and they didn't fall apart. But that is like a silk chiffon. And when I was up in New York City, I went to Mood Fabric and I found the perfect fabric for this in a silk chiffon. So that is done. I also don't want to skip out on the detail of the individual custom buttons that they put on this outfit as well. Super beautiful. I'm gonna have to design and 3D print those because they are very unique. And I love the asymmetry of the jacket, which allows those stripes to come across. They were beautifully aligned with each other across the opening. I am particularly wanting to make this from the first time we see this outfit, so like the way we see it in Universal. However, I want to also make it with the gloves and the cute little hat, which I don't recall if that was at the experience. If it is, I will definitely have it in the video. And then the adorable shoes, which are just too perfect with their pink little laces. Her outfit is so good. It is so wearable in real life. The construction on it was so incredibly perfect, and the silhouette is stunning. I cannot get over how much I love this outfit, and it is going to be the first one out of the 3 that I make. So the romper will more than likely be the last one I make because I'm not as excited about it, but I have this plan that I'm putting together that I won't divulge just yet. So I am very much looking forward to this one, and I want to construct it as best as I can because I do fully intend to wear pieces of this as work outfits. Now I want to move on to the one that I've been most excited to talk about because it is the one everyone loves, and it is Glinda's bubble dress. To start off, I just want to give a couple facts from this dress. So apparently this dress has 137 pattern pieces, 20,000 beads that were hand applied over 225 hours. Additionally, it took 140 costume crew members working around the clock to pull this dress off. And I want to do it all by my little self. So it's going to be a challenge, but I think it's going to be worth it. So I think the majority of people know that this dress is constructed completely out of spirals, Fibonacci spiral, which is a very specific type of spiral that you can manipulate to get these individual little swirly shapes that her dress has. The color of the dress, very much a nod to the original movie. So there was a lot of trouble with the Wicked musical when it came out. They could not secure the rights from MGM to do anything that would infringe upon the copyright of the original 1937 movie. The Wizard of Oz. So that's why we do not have red slippers, but instead on the stage show you have silver slippers, and then they shine a red light on them when there's magic put on them. So they're not actually red, they're silver, which is a nod to the book. They couldn't pull from the movie, pulled from the book. So they couldn't do red slippers, so they did silver slippers, which actually were on display there as well. They're very, very beautiful. They couldn't do the pink dress in the stage production of Wicked because that pink was a very specific pink that was custom to the Wizard of Oz movie. They couldn't do that. So they did a blue dress instead. But this is a nod to the movie because now they are allowed to pull upon references from the movie. And there were a lot of them in this movie. A lot of references to the Wizard of Oz. So we get her pink dress, which is a very similar shade to the Wizard of Oz pink dress. The silhouette is also, in my opinion, feels like a more toned down nod to the original Glinda dress. Of course, everything about this dress is bubbles, so it needs to be light and have those curves in it that sort of nod to the shape of bubble, and that is how they were able to accomplish it, by being incredibly smart and creating something with these Fibonacci spirals. So the skirt itself, I also think, is made out of silk chiffon, and it is layers upon layers of these individually cut spirals. And interestingly enough, it appears that the spirals themselves are supported with various lines of what to me looked like some sort of wire or fishing line. I've heard boning, and in other photos, to me, it also kind of looks more like plastic boning. And they allowed those to be visible, which I think adds some fun to the dress and breaks up the spirals a little bit. So those are folded up and layered around the skirt. I do want to point out, though, there also appears to be some sort of ombre effect happening on this dress. There is some much darker pink that you can see that is visible, and I think that that gets muted when you layer the other pieces on top, which adds a very subtle ombre effect. But there is some sort of ombre effect happening. And then the bodice itself is structured, it's corseted, and the shape of the pieces, the panel pieces put over it, are also spirals that have been cut down. It extends down over on top of the skirt, and you can clearly see that spiral is there. There is a lot of sequence and beading on this dress, and on the skirt the beading makes these cute little bubbles. So there's bubbles sewn all over this dress, and then there is more of the swirl or spiral look that goes over the bodice. This dress is incredibly complicated to look at, but I think it is a bit simpler to create than it seems. It does have a custom hoop skirt underneath that is not as big as you would expect, because that's the way they manipulated the spirals actually gives the structure to poof out. I think this is a silk organza. You can clearly see wear and tear in the fabric, and on the edges of the fabric, when you look very closely, you can see they freight checked this. There is this very, very thin, darker line on the edges that has a slight shine to it and looks almost perfectly to dried fray check. So I am convinced that they left the edges raw and then fray checked them to keep this from falling apart. So my thoughts with the construction of this, I think to construct this dress, you're going to have to create a custom hoop skirt that is like an A-line hoop skirt. It doesn't look too terribly complicated. It actually doesn't even have that much boning in it. I got to go kind of under the dress to take a look. And then on top of that, there isn't really a petticoat per se, it's just layers of these spirals, and I'm thinking the way to do it is to cut out the exact same spiral over and over and over again, layer them up, and then custom cut each one until you get the exact shape that you see in the movie. It's kind of hard to tell what they are until you get them up on the mannequin, and I do know Bella May Designs is in the middle of creating this dress, and she utilized paper to pattern out the spirals and custom cut them, which I think is super smart because paper is going to mimic the structure of each of these spirals. The placement of the boning on this is quite unique. They did bead over where the boning is to help that blend in a little bit more, but the boning is not perfectly placed throughout. It almost looks like you have one going down and then another one coming off. But where you see those lines, that is the boning and the structure. And then of course you have that bodice, which I think can be constructed as a simple sweetheart neckline bodice that laces in the back with all of your structure in that, and then layer spirals on top of it and cut into custom shape. And then of course do all of your beading and stuff off of the bodice, because that will be a nightmare to put together. And this appears to have a ton of hand sewing in it, so that is super exciting. And then also on display next to this dress, we got a very up close look of her crown, which is of course bubbles upon bubbles upon bubbles. We got a look at her wand, which is a clear acrylic post with my cat is going nuts back there, with a bubble on top and asymmetrical little jeweled spikes coming off, but I got a great look at that. I am not certain how I'm going to make that, but it is being thought through. And then of course the shoes. That is my experience with seeing the costumes up close. I am super excited that I was able to get all of these little details that you just don't get from looking online or watching the movie. And I hope that my images and videos help you if you decide to create these as well. So I am just happy to share the stunning details of these costumes. So this was less of a costume analysis and more of me gushing over the beauty of the costumes of only four costumes in Wicked. So I did also get to see some of Elphaba's costumes up close, but I did not pay that much attention to them because I was not as interested. They are also beautiful and constructed, and interestingly enough, they took inspiration from mushrooms, which I thought was really neat, but I don't plan on creating those, so I didn't think to really spend a lot of time examining them. With that, I hope you liked this video. Make sure to subscribe for more content from me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!